Hello there, welcome to Lacey Walker Art. Today we're going to be learning how to mix colors to paint a beautiful sunset with a mountain scene. Let's get started. As usual, the first thing we need to do is clean up our palette. Now that that's done, let's lay out our colors. We've got a phthalo blue, ultramarine, a violet, a orange, and a white. I'm going to take some of the phthalo blue and the ultramarine, a tiny bit of the orange to balance it out, and a little bit of the purple and white to bring it down, as well as brighten it. And once you have that mixed up, we want to keep mixing in steps. So our first is a dark blue, then we've got a slightly lighter blue, then we're mixing to a more purple color. And to extend that purple, we're going to even bring in some more magenta tones to really bring out that purple. You'll start to see it now. We're going to be moving in this sunset as a gradient from a dark blue all the way to almost a bright yellow. So we are moving now towards the oranges. And the way I like to work with this is I use the color from before to build it until I get to the real orangey colors, and then I do need to clean off my palette knife at some point so that when I want to get those real vibrant colors, I'm not bringing those blues with me. So now we're down to the real orangey orange color, and our final color that we're going to mix up is a bright yellow. So what we're going to do is we're going to paint this. It's going to go about a third of the way down, starting with our darkest color. After you add the darkest color, go in and kind of move down the gradient range that you've created. Each one that you add, you're going to want to blend up and down into it. This is going to create kind of a seamless effect. And the other thing I'm doing is I want this to be that real glow that just pops out from behind the mountains, so it's not a full-blown sunset, it's almost the very end of one. So I'm getting smaller and smaller with the layers that I put on here, thinner lines, so that it's going to kind of just hover above the mountains. We will need to do a couple layers of this to ensure that we completely cover the background. It's also going to end up making our transition smoother. So we'll go ahead and just keep working back and forth, starting from the darkest, going to the lightest, and when I get to about the pinky color, I do wash out my brush so that I'm not bringing that blue color in. You'll see at this point I do still have a little streakiness, but that will get improved. The other benefit to working in layers here is that you're going to kind of learn how the paint is going to work and where you want the more pigment to be or less pigment to be. So you'll get a chance to do that kind of over and over again to build up that opacity as well as create those transitions that you're looking for. Let's go ahead and get this sky finished off. It's around this time when I kind of decide that I don't want my yellow to be super uniform, so I'm going to kind of try to concentrate that in one area where I imagine the sun to be. And you do need to be careful when you're painting here. If you're working on kind of wet layers, you'll see I just picked up all of the layers that were on top of the gesso, and so we need to make sure it's dry before you're going back. So I took a little break and I'm coming back for a final layer here. And because I mixed up too many different colors, I kind of just pushed them off to the side in case I want to use them inside of this painting, and I create a new space for myself to mix up the color of my mountains. I'm going to be working from the furthest away as my first layer, and this I want to make into kind of a real blue, purple, gray type color. First I'm going to touch up a little bit more of that yellow because I wasn't quite satisfied, but we'll move on to the mixing of the colors soon. For the mountains, especially when the sun is setting behind them, the very tips of them are going to be a darker color, and then there's kind of a foggy effect behind that, or in front of it, kind of in the foreground, as you move towards the viewer. So I'm going to be mixing up just a little bit. So here's my darkest color that I'm outlining my mountains with, and then I'm going to be coming back after I have where the mountains are, and I'm going to be mixing in the lighter color into the black, and I'll be going back and forth a few times to kind of make that transition a little more smooth, as well as maybe make a little more dark areas where I believe there'd be a shadow and a little more white areas where I think there's a highlight. Mountains are in layers, so we're going to want to work in layers and kind of move to a slightly different color. I want it to be in the same family, but this one is a little more purple, and I am going from the most diluted version of kind of a gray-black in the very back to a darker color in the foreground. So I'm using my next layer and then even the one after that. I'm becoming more vibrant and more black with each layer. And again, I'm using that same rule of having the darkest color of that layer right along the ridge of the mountain range and blending in a lighter color, adding shadows where I believe there are shadows and highlights where I think there are highlights. You can decide to have as many layers of mountains as you want. I've decided that I want another layer of kind of hills here, as well as then I'm going to do a meadow in the foreground. So this is going to be my last dark layer, and I want that to be almost kind of right in sight of the viewer. So I'm making it's more of a brown, it's more of a vibrant, real color. It's not so much kind of these hazy blues or purples. And then what I want to do is I want to go back and I want to highlight some of the areas even more with the bright colors we have. So I'm taking a blending medium I have, and I'm using those sunset colors and diluting them with the medium, and I'm just barely tapping them on the areas of the rock where light would be hitting them. And this is really going to kind of make the painting pop a little more. I'm going back in with the yellow and the oranges. And you can kind of do this until you just believe that it's right. And you can already tell how much of a difference it's made even from how far away this is. Next, I'm going to be mixing up some kind of dark greens to form the base of some of these trees that I see in my foreground. You'll see I'm taking the brush and I'm kind of just moving it in the direction of where the boughs of the pine trees would be. I'm starting with a darker color and I'm going over each layer with a lighter color and a lighter touch. Then I added some green and I add a little bit of a highlight to the very tops of what I imagine to be either tops of little plants or tops of grass. And I want there to be a meadow in the foreground. So I base it with a green. I add in some dark areas to suggest maybe some hills. I'm thinking there's almost some lavender type wildflowers with a few highlights, and I can reuse the sunset colors for these, which is great. And after I add in those lavenders, I can go in and add kind of another hill area. And I top that with just kind of like as if the sun-kissed glow is touching the top of that layer. And then I use this kind of fun bristle brush, and I go back and forth between kind of a grassy green and almost this neon green to create these kind of blades of grass. And I'm going to come back in with one final little area of flowers and finer detail where I actually show the stems as well as each individual flower on the plant. And I do that by adding in the main color of the flower, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to highlight it with a little white. And I think it looks really nice. So we'll sign it, and then we're done. I know that this might not have been a super in-depth tutorial, but this did take me about an hour and a half to paint. I'm pretty happy with the way that it turned out. Let's turn off the light so you can see the detail a little better. But if you try, I'm sure you can make something really beautiful as well. Thank you so much for watching, and if you would like to see more videos like this, please subscribe.